some bad news.
Bad news.
Yeah. Not for you,
Oh, okay.
for the audience. And that is Meredith is back.
Okay. That is rude. That's rude. I am back though. So
She's back, bitches.
I'm back, bitches.
And I can tell she's back, not only by her presence, of course, but by how dirty the stove is.
Look, like I've cleaned the stove twice since I've been back. Go look at it right now. Tell me if it's dirty.
It is. I know. You're doing a better job.
Mm-hmm. I can tell I'm back because I get this question a lot. What's the plan? What's the plan for the day? What are you planning on doing today? What time are you going to do this? What time do you think you're going to work out? What's your workout? What movements are in your workout? Are you going to run today? Are we planning on going to the grocery store? What's your plan for next week? Do you have any plans? It's like that. That's how I know I'm back.
Yeah.
So it's good.
So
Yes.
you mean you're being productive again?
Yeah, we'll go with
You're
that.
planning ahead. You're being productive. You're getting shit done.
Mm-hmm.
You're not forgetting things because I'm reminding you.
Yeah,
That sort of thing.
exactly.
So we're both happy that we're back together.
Yeah. Reunited, and it feels so good. Did you get it? You got the joke?
Yeah.
Okay. I can tell when you get a joke because you laugh. You actually laugh kind of hard instead of like fake laughing. So it's good. Yeah, I don't know how to like honestly live up to what you put out while I was gone.
You will never. I may have another one in the works.
Okay.
But it's not about you.
Oh.
We'll see. We'll see if I feel like I worry. I've set the bar so high
Yeah.
that it's going to be hard to match that. And I just don't want to be disappointing people.
I don't know. I think you could come up with like a series, just life stories, little tidbits.
My next podcast was going to be on like awkward moments that we all experience but never talk about.
Ooh. Do you want to like, what's a little spoiler?
Well, like one that I was thinking of, and it's like that moment in a massage, like not like a sports massage, like a therapeutic massage, when you're lying there naked and they like pull the covers up
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, please turn around, like roll towards me onto your back.
Yeah.
But you're like completely exposed. Like they've lifted the covers off of you.
Yeah.
And you ever wonder, like, they could be peeking over that sheet.
Yeah.
You're completely exposed. Unless you're like me. Very untrustworthy, and so I always wear underwear.
Oh, yeah, I do too, usually. It's just, it feels better.
Yeah.
I think that,
Brenda says that wearing underwear at a massage ruins the massage because they have to, like, maneuver around them when they're massaging your butt.
I don't get my butt massaged that often. I'm not like, you know what? Massage my ass cheeks.
I mean, they definitely do, like, aggressively pull your panties down to
Mhm.
massage the upper part of your butt.
I'm sure
And
that
you're
they
like,
can,
wow, you can see my butt crack.
Yeah.
But it's okay. But
What?
it's still awkward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It's a
Maybe
weird phenomenon.
maybe being completely nude in a massage like serves some other purpose for people. It's like exhilarating.
Maybe.
So like, ooh, it takes away from the experience if I'm not completely nude. It's not as exciting.
Yeah, it's possible.
I think my awkward moment, although this one probably gets talked about, is when you're like, maybe you've stopped somewhere to chat with a friend who you run into at the park when you're there feeding the ducks
Mm-hmm.
with your grandparent. Just, that's an example.
Yeah.
And so you're chatting with your friend. Your grandfather has left because Walter doesn't have patience for duck feeding.
No,
Or
he doesn't. We've
chit-chat.
actually never duck fed.
Yeah.
Fed ducks.
This is a hypothetical though.
Okay.
So this is my world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're feeding the ducks with Walter, and he's already run out of patience for the ducks. And then you stop to talk to your friend who's an ex-ski racer, and he's run out of patience for that because he wants to go and, you know, home and eat
Where are you
pierogies.
heading with this?
Just I'm painting the picture. So
I mean, the problem there, first off, is if I see somebody I know, I completely ignore them and pretend I don't see them to avoid the experience of having to talk to an old friend.
Yeah, I mean, so
But
we're just
let's
gonna
pretend that doesn't happen.
let's assume that that's not happened. Let's assume that we've gotten past the point where you
They've already
walk
seen
up.
me.
Yeah, you've walked up to your old friend and started to talk to them, and they've already said, "I'm sorry, who are you?" And you go, "Oh, it's Alex Parker," and they're like, "Oh, right, Alex." They remembered you. That awkward moment is gone.
Okay.
They're not like, "What's your name again?" Anyways, you're chatting. You both remember each other, talking about the good times, ski racing, and then it's time to part ways. And you say, "Well, it was really nice catching up with you, Susie. Hopefully we can do this again soon. I'll talk to you later." And she says, "That sounds great. Bye." And then you both start walking off
In the same direction. That's definitely been talked about.
Yeah.
So no, that's not going to make the cut.
Okay.
That's why you don't have your own solo podcast.
Oh, okay.
But good try.
I'll do better next time.
No, that is awkward. But that's why you have to avoid those situations altogether.
Well, you know what? I have a move. I go through that whole rigmarole, and then I say goodbye, and then I either pause to look at something on my phone or tie my shoe so I can see what direction they're going. And even if I need to be going in that direction, I will turn around and walk in the opposite direction for a period of time.
That is when I've probably done that.
If there's a bush, maybe I instead of just indefinitely walking opposite, maybe I'll duck in behind the bush.
Or you jump in the pond or something.
Literally just anything to run into the men's room, whatever it is, just to get out of that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was your trip? I mean, obviously I already know, but for our listeners,
it was great.
The one listener.
1 million, you mean? Yeah, I went to North Carolina to visit with my sister and her new baby, Ashton, my nephew. She had him in early March, so he was about a month old. He's 5 or 6 weeks old now. Really fresh. You don't realize how helpless babies are until you're around a really fresh one for a period of time. But it was great. He was really cute. It's weird. I'm not necessarily a baby person or a kid person. Never had strong urges to have them. I'm not one of those people who, when there's a baby around, I'm like, "Oh, can I hold it?" I've never been that person. I think I wasn't really exposed to babies, and also I don't think I'm a particularly motherly individual. But there's something about when your twin has a baby and that baby kind of looks like you when you were a baby. There's definitely, I could have a baby that looked just like that. There's an extra, now I'm interested in that baby. More than I've been interested in.
Well, it might just be that you're related to it. It's not the fact that she's your twin.
That's true.
I think aunts generally feel that way around family.
I don't know. I one of my friends online, Addie, the girl who runs, she's a twin also, and I guess her twin just had a baby, and she posted something a couple of days ago that said something to the effect of, when your twin has this is my niece, there's something about when your twin has a kid.
But does she have another sister who's not her twin?
No.
Well, then how does she know it's different?
I don't know. She's probably making the same assumptions that I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's really cute. He was on a 36-hour poop cycle, so I guess newborns or babies don't poop every 24 hours like adults do. So he was pooping every 36 hours, and twice he pooped while I was holding him. So I have the touch for that. And that babies fart kind of a lot, which I didn't know. He's just a fart machine. But yeah, you can always tell because he'll go from farting to sharting, and the sound is different. And then there's the smell. And then the second time it escaped his diaper onto my forearm, and that was really special. But It was great. It was a nice visit. The first couple of days, I have really terrible pollen allergies, and the pollen was really bad. So either I was having extremely bad pollen allergies or I had COVID. I'm not sure which one it was. But I'm better. So yeah, and then I went to Boston and met you.
Didn't you get? I thought we were gonna talk about your foot.
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess that gets lumped in with.
So you've been having foot problems since what, December?
Yeah, so it started up mid-December, and if you've been, maybe you know this if you've been following, but I'll do a quick background. Like mid-December, I went on a run, and at that point, I had run the half marathon in September, but had like been running in the fall, and then started to do more speed work, kind of leading into December, because I'm sort of aiming for like that sub 90 this year. So I was still running quite a bit, like doing pretty high volume. It wasn't like I was deconditioned for running by any stretch of the imagination. So I think I had like a 15K programmed on the same day that you had a 18K or something like that. So I was like, well, I'll just run the 18K with you.
Well, it was really windy.
It
Remember
was
that day, and so I was like, what we should do is run east and get my mom to pick us up downtown and drive us back home.
Yeah.
Because it was so windy that running into the wind would have just been absolutely horrible. And it was winter, so it was really cold.
Yeah. So we ran point to point from our house into downtown. And the only odd thing about that run was the first 8 kilometers was on, once you got out of our neighborhood, it was kind of on packed snow. So it was like a pathway, but it had snowed and gotten packed out. And that's just kind of how that area is in the wintertime. So kind of it's not as loose as sand, like running on the beach.
It's like running on sand that the tide has just touched.
Yeah. So you get, it's relatively solid, but as you push off, there's definitely some slippage, but not really enough to have a major impact on pace. So it was fine. Felt fine during the run. Finished it. The next day I had really terrible heel pain, sort of plantar fasciitis pain crop up, which is odd. I've had plantar fasciitis before and it always comes on pretty slowly. And this was just flip a switch, severe plantar fasciitis. Could barely put weight on my foot. And then it improved after a couple of days, but was still there. So I kind of figured I would just try to run through it and do, see if it would go away. And it didn't. And then I cut volume way back and it still would I would, go on a short run and it would crop up the next day. And so kind of decided at some point to just fully off running, just stop running. Because there wasn't really a point for me to be running 20 kilometers a week. That wasn't going to be moving me towards my goals. And it seemed like even that small a volume was going to hinder recovery. So I started going to PT, started getting some massage, just started trying to work through it. And yeah, it was lingering. So I made the decision, actually scheduled to get imaging done here to kind of start the process of seeing a sports specialist and getting it taken care of. And, booking the imaging was 6 weeks out. And then that's just the beginning of the process. An MRI would take even longer, injection would take even longer. So I kind of decided to take advantage of my time in North Carolina and book in with this doctor, this orthopedist who is there, who happens to be the foot guy. And I've seen him before for a different issue. And yeah, just get it pay out of pocket and get it taken care of there. So that's what I did. I saw him and then he said, just based on kind of an exam, he did an exam and I didn't have on my left foot, which is the injured one, didn't have a prominent central cord of my plantar fascia. So your plantar fascia has 3 cords, 2 lateral and 1 that runs down the middle. And he said, it's weird because your right one is very prominent. And then your left one, he's like, I can't find it, essentially. He's like, I'm worried that you may have ruptured it. And if that's the case, then we wouldn't want to do a cortisone injection, which is what I was there to get. So he said, I'm out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to recommend that you get an MRI, just so we don't do any, do more damage to it. So I got an MRI, super fast turnaround. So I had that appointment on Thursday, got the MRI on Saturday, back in the office on the following Wednesday to do the readout. So just like super quick turnaround on it. And then based on
And
the
it
MRI,
was only 10 times more expensive.
well, that's the thing is the turnaround was really quick. I did pay out of pocket. It was quite expensive. I could have paid out of pocket to have it done here and it would have been slightly less, but then I don't get to see like the guy. So it was just a decision that I made. And I recognize there's a great deal of privilege in being able to make that decision. But yeah, the MRI showed a really like very thick plantar fascia right in front of the heel. And he said what I think this is it was ruptured and then it healed on its own. He's like, if with the timeline being mid-December, that makes sense. He's like, so it's really, really thick. There's a lot of thickening. There's a lot of inflammation. And then you have a bone spur and what appears to be some edema on the opposite side, which suggests that you had a stress fracture at one time, probably from trying to run through it and compensating. But he's like, because he said normally I would be concerned about this, but because you've taken time off, it's in my mind probably on the up and up, like healing rather than getting worse. So yeah, I got a cortisone injection that day, which hurt badly, but it's doing much better, which I've had cortisone injections before and they can be pretty magical. But they do kind of require that you treat the area appropriately rather than just like rushing back into whatever you were doing that hurt it in the first place. So yeah, I'm kind of doing a couch to 5K type program for the next 4 to 6 weeks. A lot of run, walk, very low volume, very slow, just to recondition the foot and make sure that it's safe and good to go for the summer. So I have I'm cautiously optimistic at this point because it feels really good.
It's been a bit of a long one. Like, I guess in the grand scheme of things, a few months isn't that long, but when you don't exactly know what's going on and why it's not improving,
Yeah.
it's hard to like manage that mentally. At least it would be for me. So like, but I feel like with you, you're better at managing like injuries than I would be, or like other people. You kind of just refocus back on strength, did what you could.
Yeah.
You don't complain.
I think it helps that I'm not, I didn't have like Boston on my calendar. I didn't have anything that I had to do. Like I have a goal, but there's no real time limit on that. So my main goal just in life, like generally right now, is to feel good and be healthy and like be able to do the things that I enjoy doing, which, is working out, running, biking. So if it meant that I needed to take some time off in the winter time when it's not particularly pleasant to run anyways, then I was willing to do that. And the reality is if I had gone to see Dr. Hewitt in, February rather than in April and done the same thing and had the MRI and it was ruptured, it would be like, yeah, well, there's nothing that you can do other than rest it anyway. So, what I did, I think, was an inevitable, period of rest to heal. However, I still don't know how it happened. I think it was a combination of the run and, I stepped on that one piece of ice that one time, kind of tweaked my foot. It's just like a perfect storm.
Yeah. That was not a good run for you. I remember that run.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, it's good that it's back.
Yeah.
It feels like normal again.
Yep. I'm just happy to be outside running my 2 kilometers.
Yeah.
That's okay. So let's talk about your running.
Yeah. I did Boston just less than a week ago. Monday, April 18th.
The Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I ran it in 3:08:45, which is a 4:27 per kilometer pace.
Yeah.
Which is, what is that in miles?
I think it's like a 7:10. I can tell you.
I have it right here.
Okay.
It's it is a 7:10.
Yeah.
7:10 minute per mile.
Yes.
And it was tough.
Yeah.
So like what? Okay, so I signed up. I guess I'll just start.
Yeah. Well,
I did
how did you qualify for Boston?
Yeah.
Because I had a few people ask, well, how did she get in? How long, like, how did she get in for the lottery? So I guess
There
explain,
is no lottery in Boston.
well, charity, sorry.
Oh,
Like what charity? So explain like how many people have to qualify versus how many charity spots there are and like how
Okay.
that process
So
works.
as you probably know if you're a listener, I ran the Chicago Marathon in October, and I did that through a charity. So Chicago is one of the ones that you have to get in through a lottery, or you have to do it through a charity. So I fundraised for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and you get a spot. You don't have to apply for the lottery. You get a spot. They're allotted a certain number of charity spots. And I ran that marathon in 3:22 something.
Yeah, like 3:22:30.
Yeah. And so that was fast enough to qualify me for Boston. And in Boston, you either have to qualify. There's qualifying standards based on your your sex and your age.
Mm-hmm.
So for my age, I'm in between the like it's like 18 to 35, I think is sub 330. So you have to be sub 330 to even be able to register. And then depending on how many people register, like there are some years where you actually have to be significantly faster than 330 to actually get in.
Like meet and exceed the standard.
Yeah, it really depends on how many people apply.
Yeah.
So in my year, everyone, I think it's because there weren't as many qualifying races to get a qualifying time due to COVID, that everyone who was under the standard in every age group got in.
They also ran out of time to validate times.
Yeah. So there were 30,000 runners in Boston, and roughly 80% of those people qualified. 20% are charity. So I guess that means there were 6,000 people who were running for a charity and didn't have qualifying times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did qualify for Boston. And then when I ran Chicago, my goal wasn't to qualify for Boston, but I had a client who was running a marathon just after Chicago, and her goal was to qualify for Boston, and she did. And so I was kind of like, well, maybe I should run Boston. Like, I didn't really understand the hype around Boston. And then I started looking into it, and I was like, I might as well do it. And so then I started training for Boston in November. So I trained for 5.5 months.
Yeah.
And in that time got quite a bit faster and more comfortable with like the running volume and stuff.
Yeah. I think what has to be pointed out, I think, is that the bulk of your training for Boston, and you knew this going into it, occurred during probably the worst season for running in Calgary. So, I mean, you started training in November. It's already kind of starting to get cold. December this year in Calgary was brutal.
Yeah, there were some really cold days.
And just this winter in general, I feel like had a lot of really cold days. Or it was like, it would be kind of nice, but super windy.
Yeah.
So it was like, I think that's something that is a little bit different for your training compared to someone who lives in a more temperate climate. And I just think that there's a lot of people who just wouldn't do it. They would either run inside, like treadmill training or indoor track, or they wouldn't run a race in the spring.
Yeah, it was tough when it was really cold because like I do have a cutoff, and it's like if it exceeds, if it's colder than -20 with wind chill, -25, then I'm like, that is not safe. I once ran when it was really cold and I got frostbite on my face. And I've also like injured myself by running in the really cold because your gait changes, like your shoes freeze and the foam gets really hard. You risk running in like some super slippery weather and things like that. It's just not good. So I had that cut off. And there were a couple days where it was super cold, and my option, because of COVID, they didn't have any indoor tracks open.
Because usually they have
the
Olympic Oval,
which is a good track. It's like 500 meters. So I was like, okay, I'll just do that. But they didn't have it open. And then like my parents, they have an old treadmill that is like, it's fine, but it's like, it's small, and it's running like, I think I did like a couple like 12 or 15K. So
Yeah.
like an hour and 20 minutes, an hour to an hour and 20 minutes. Like treadmill is brutal.
The only time I ran on that one this year before I stopped was like 10K. And I
Yeah.
was like, this was horrible.
It's really boring. And then also like there was one day it was really cold and I had to run intervals and I tried to do intervals on it and I tried to bring it up to like a fast pace and it just like shut off.
Yeah.
'Cause the thing is like really old.
Yeah.
Like 25 years old.
Yep.
But yeah, I did almost all my runs outside and just kind of sucked it up. There was one I remember, it was 21K and it was absolutely freezing outside.
Yeah.
And like you get to a point where you're running and like your inside is warm because you're running,
Yeah.
but like the outside, like my arms would start getting really cold, like the skin,
Yeah.
and you would come back and even for like an hour after, like your skin on the outside would still feel cold.
Yeah. I would, when I was running in December, like before my foot thing, I remember there was one, I think I went out and it was like minus 21 or something like that. And I went out for a run and it was from the house. So ran out, came back, and just my whole face was completely covered. I put a picture up that day because it was just so absurd.
Yeah.
But I remember I felt okay. And then I got in the shower and it was like someone had taken like a hot poker to my ass. And I looked back and like, I think partially because you just have more fat that accumulates on the back of your legs. Just like, you know, ass fat, leg fat back there. And you're not like,
it's like separated apart from your body.
yeah, because your muscles, they stay warm and they generate heat. So I think like your quads and like where you're just leaner is going to be just a little bit warmer. But your fat tissue it's not as active. It's not active at all.
My triceps are always like bright red.
Yeah. I just thought it was really, so mine were like red, but then also a little bit swollen. So that was
Sometimes my butt gets like itchy.
I know. Yeah. That was like
This
whole,
is a weird phenomenon.
and it stays itchy for like an hour
Yeah.
while it warms up. Super weird. Yeah. It's just one of those like winter running things. But I had a lot of people be like, why don't you run on a treadmill? Like, why are you running outside kind of thing? And then it's just like, because I hate running on a treadmill.
Yeah. And for the most part, you can dress appropriately enough, like to a point where then your feet get cold and things like that, or like exposing your skin is difficult.
You can do like cross country skiers and just start like taping over your nose and like on your face.
Yeah.
And I did buy one of those masks, but I never got to use it because it was after I had hurt myself. But
like the one thing I noticed, and I've noticed, I've run in the winter many times before, like all through law school and stuff. I was running before classes, but the first few runs when it's cold, it's hard. It's like your body isn't used to it.
yeah,
Your brain isn't used to it. And then it gets like through the winter, you kind of adjust. It's like, oh, it's cold, but it doesn't have as much of it's like you're adapted to it in a way.
yeah,
It's like I used to have cold showers before bed. And
Yeah.
the first few were brutal, but then you almost like you get used to it.
yes,
And so like it's not as bad in the middle of winter as you think because you're used to it. And then also, you learn about like all this science around like cold exposure and stuff. And I think, I don't do any of that. But then I think it actually is really good for you to expose yourself to cold
Yeah.
sometimes. And then also hot therapy with like a shower. So I'm like, oh, you're getting a lot of benefits. Not to mention the fact that being outside in the winter is it's not that common unless you're a skier
yeah,
or you do another winter activity or you go for walks. I find that having run this winter, I just felt like I was in a better mood. Partially because running makes me be in a good mood, but I think getting your eyeballs like exposed to the sunlight and just being outside, breathing fresh air.
yeah, and like disconnecting, like not being on your
Mhm.
phone, not having any music or anything for, 3 or 4 times a week, and getting to spend time outside. I think that's
Yeah. So while there were
a
days where I was
positive
like, ugh, I think for the most part, I was positive about it.
yeah,
And then also having something like the Boston Marathon on the calendar, of course, is somewhat externally motivating as well.
exactly.
But
all right, so that's a little training rabbit hole. Let's get back to Boston weekend. So qualified for Boston, trained through the winter time. When did you start? So I think when you initially set out for Boston, you kind of decided like a sub 3 hour 15 minute would be the goal, like a train, like goal pace for setting training paces. At what time or what point did you realize your race pace was likely to be quite a bit faster than a sub 3:15 pace, and even like a sub, getting into like the sub 3:10, which I want to point out, I called that one a long time ago.
I think it was like 7 or 8 weeks out, I did 15K at race pace, which was determined by me. I was determining race pace. And I ran like hard. I was just like, I'm going to see how this feels, like a little bit faster. And I always think I'll start out with the first few kilometers fast and then ease into it and find like that comfortable pace where I'm like, this is sustainable, but I'm pushing. And I ended up, I think it was around like a 3:30. And I'm like, damn, I did not realize I could do that, because November 2020, which is about now a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
I ran a 10K for time and barely did it in under with a 4:30 pace, so 45 minutes. And my heart rate was high. And I remember that my RPE was like 9.5 out of 10 by the end. Brutal.
Yeah.
And then I got home and I like legitimately had diarrhea. Like that's how hard the effort was.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how is it possible I'm running longer at that pace at like with my heart rate being like 165?
Yeah.
And that's when I started gaining confidence. And then I think I did like a slower, longer run the next week. And then the next week I did 25K at race pace. Sorry, 20K at race pace.
And this was in around the February, sometime in February, March.
And
early
yeah,
March?
beginning of March, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was able to hit that pace again.
Yeah.
And then I did that at 25, like 2 weeks later, I did 25K. And I was like, I felt amazing. And I think I ran like a 4:30, it was sub 4:30, like
I think your
4:24.
25 was like a 4:24.
Yeah. And I remember you were with me that day.
Yep.
And I felt amazing. Like I remember running the last K thinking like, I could sprint this in. Like that's how good I feel. Like my body feels good. My heart rate is manageable. And I had the intro workout carb loading like nailed down from Chicago. So that was all good. And then 2 weeks after that, I ran 32K at race pace. And that was one where I was like, I'm going to just like push hard and see what happens, because I don't want to get to the marathon and play it safe. I want to know going in, like, what is possible. And this 32 will kind of give me an idea.
So 32, that's 10 kilometers or around 6 miles short of the total distance.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I ran that one hard, and I did a carb load before. Like I basically treated it as if I was running the marathon.
Yeah.
And you were out there with your bike, like giving me carbs on the intervals that we had planned.
Yep.
And it was good up until like 26. And then I got to like, yeah, about 6 kilometers out from finishing 32K, it started getting really hard.
Yeah.
I felt like my heart rate was like going to beat out of my chest. Like my heart was going to beat out of my chest. I was like, I don't know if this is sustainable. So I figured I could probably run the marathon in under 3:10, knowing that if I had done the last 10K in sub 5 minute mile kilometers, then I could do it.
Plus you have the added benefit.
Plus I would have been tapered.
Yeah, you like appropriately tapered, more extensive carb load, and also at sea level,
Yeah.
which I think is very important to point out.
So that's kind of how I determined. But then I didn't go into Boston with the expectation or the goal of 3:10. My goal was to just like run it as well as I could.
Yeah.
And then in the marathon, I think I knew I was going to be sub 10 at the 32K mark. I was like, and I had just like hit the peak of Heartbreak Hill.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can do it now.
Yeah. I think that like not like understanding what you're capable of, but not like explicitly putting that goal on the race is I think it's a really important strategy, because it keeps you, I think, out of your head a little bit. I think a lot of people, like either more novice runners or just people who set goal times differently, you can say I want to run this in sub 3:10, but what happens if you have a kilometer where you're off that pace? It really, like, it's a slippery slope on, like you get really focused on having that bad kilometer, or yeah, you get caught up in traffic and that slows you down, instead of just, I'm going to run each kilometer the best that I can, understanding how many kilometers I have left to run and within my capabilities.
Yeah.
And I think it keeps you a little more present in the race, like specifically the point of the race that you're in, instead of getting wrapped up in what you feel like you should be doing in that moment to reach a goal, which
Yeah.
you're probably going to reach anyways. But yeah, I think it's so funny. People always ask like, well, what was her goal? And usually I say to run as fast as she can.
Which is true. You do want to have an idea, which I did. I had an idea of like a goal pace.
Yeah.
But I knew that there was some like fluidity within that. And then I also knew like, I'm so dumb. I like didn't even look at what the course was like at Boston until like a week before. And I'm reading all these articles that were like, make sure you train downhill, make sure you train uphill. The course is really hilly. And I was like, thinking back, and I'm like, all of my long runs, all of my pace runs were on completely flat.
Yeah.
Like along a river. I was like, damn it.
Yeah, that was
I
probably
made a huge mistake. And then, you know, you read articles like, because the beginning of Boston starts downhill for like 4K.
Yeah.
And it was like, don't start out too fast. The downhill really takes a toll on your legs. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to run this.
I don't know how to run downhill.
Like my dad, like the marathon is a tricky duration. It's a tricky distance because things could be going so well and you might, like, it accumulates, but you don't know it's accumulating until it's too late.
The race doesn't really start until there's, like 12 kilometers left, 10 kilometers, because it's all about setting yourself up to like be at that, like you want to be right at your threshold, right at that red line without blowing it up and just completely like losing it.
But you also can't make up time in the last 10K because that's only a quarter of the race. And you still have that like volume accumulation on your legs.
Yeah.
So my dad is funny because I was talking to him about my potential like pacing, and he's an experienced marathon runner, and he's like, oh, well, what I would do is I would just like pick a time and try to run that time. And I'm like, but I can't because the only experience I have is Chicago.
Yeah.
And it's been 6 months and I've trained a lot and have changed a lot in that time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm going into the unknown here. So sort of. But I think my training, my preparation set me up well from like a mental confidence standpoint.
Yeah.
But there were moments in the race where I was thinking to myself, I am on the edge here.
Yeah.
And almost preparing for the worst.
What, like looking back, is there anything you wish you had included more of in your training?
No.
Yeah.
I was running, so for Chicago, I was running like 45 on average kilometers a week, only 3 times a week. For Boston, I increased to 4 times a week.
Yeah.
And was running between 60 and 70 kilometers a week.
Yeah.
And that obviously made a pretty big difference in my training.
Yeah.
Most of those kilometers were slow.
I think
additional kilometers.
And you did add in more neighborhood runs. For Boston, which our neighborhood is really, really, really hilly. So you get a lot of elevation change. I think it would be good. I mean, I'm not a running coach, but thinking about what it's like to run at race pace on hills, and just like maybe add that in and get used to like running fast downhill and then running a little bit slower uphill and maintaining race pace over a number of kilometers on undulating terrain, both like not only like from a physical preparation, so you're more prepared to run downhill, but also mentally understanding I can finish this run at my race pace, even if I have kilometers that here and there that are a little bit off because of the terrain. I think that is I would need to do that because I get freaked out when I have a kilometer that's, 5 or 10 seconds off the pace that I want to be running just because it's hilly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I don't think it matters for you.
Yeah, I think the fact that I do have strong legs kind of helps from CrossFit, from keeping up like with squatting and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you don't have to run hills to strengthen your legs. I think the running hills for you would be more just like mental preparation and then also downhill preparation.
Yeah. But there like Chicago was very flat, and Boston required, and not to sound like a complete and utter nerd here, but I kind of had to study that. The couple days going in, I watched some videos. I had to like check out the course elevation, like figure out what I was getting into, because I just kept hearing like this is a really tough course. And I also wanted to know like when the hills are coming.
Yeah.
So at the 25K mark, there are a series of 4 hills.
The Newton Hills.
The Newton Hills. And I can see them on the elevation graph. But the thing about Boston is that when they say it's flat, it's not flat. Like it's not flat like Chicago. It has undulating hills.
Mm-hmm.
And so you never really know. So I did like the first Newton Hill. I was like, okay, this is a hill. And it was pretty long. Like they're probably like 3 or 4 minutes. Like some of them are almost a kilometer.
Yeah.
And you get to the top, and in between the hills, there's hills, little undulations. So I'm like, I knew there was 4, and I'm like, was that number 2? I don't know what number I'm on. Like, I don't know what is considered a hill here. And then I would hit another like significant hill. I'm like, okay, I think that's number 2.
Yeah.
And then I would get to like number 3, and I'm like, okay, is this Heartbreak Hill?
I think you know when you're
what
on
I'm
Heartbreak
doing.
Hill.
And then definitely you knew. I saw a banner at the top of Heartbreak Hill that was like, you've crested Heartbreak Hill.
Yeah.
And then you basically go straight down.
Yeah.
And your legs at that point, I was like, I'd rather be going up than down.
Can I turn around and run this backwards?
Seriously, like going down was so painful
Yeah.
on the quads. My quads, because it starts downhill for 4K, my quads definitely took a toll
Yeah.
from that. Just, I guess, the extra additional like pounding and like force.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even run that first 4K that fast because it was quite busy and you're kind of stuck in the pack. But it definitely takes a toll.
Well, there's research on downhill running, and they've done it. And the context for the research I'm thinking of is they're trying to understand the involvement of lactate in muscle fatigue. And so what they did is that they know when you run uphill or when you cycle or when you're contracting a lot, that lactate accumulates in the bloodstream, and it's just an indication that you're accumulating certain certain like metabolic waste products. There's hydrogen ions accumulating, and it oftentimes that correlates to muscle fatigue. It's not the cause, but it correlates. And so what they did is they had 3 groups of runners, and one group ran on, this is all on a treadmill. And so one group ran on an incline, and then one group ran on flat, and then one group ran on a decline. And the group that had the most muscle fatigue and muscle soreness wasn't the incline or the flat, it was the decline group. Like they had muscle fatigue set in sooner than the other 2. And so it's like, all that to say is it's, muscle fatigue is a bit more complicated. And muscle failure is quite a bit more complicated than people think, but clearly there's something going on when you run downhill that accelerates that process. So I think that a lot of people probably think like, oh, a downhill course, how nice. But really, I think that you have to be properly, or it benefits you to be somewhat trained for it.
Yeah. So Boston is net downhill.
Yeah.
But it is really hard.
Yeah.
I don't know, compared to at least Chicago, which is really, I mean, obviously I ran San Francisco, which is also one of the most hilly marathons there is, but it was so far, I can't really remember it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely felt that. I think it was in Chicago around the halfway mark where I was like, okay, I'm starting to feel my legs.
Yeah.
Whereas in
in Boston
at the 12, 15K, I was like, okay, my quads, they're torn up already.
Yeah.
You know that feeling when you do a set of heavy squats, but you haven't squatted in like a month?
And you have stabbies.
And you already feel the twinging,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, my legs are going to be not good tomorrow.
Yeah.
And they're already kind of cramping a little.
Yeah.
The stabbies is a good.
That's what I call that.
That's how I felt. And I was like, I have 27K to go.
Yeah.
Like there was this part of my brain at the back was really worried. I'm like, this could be really bad. And then there were moments where like my hamstring would twinge.
Mhm.
Like it was like the beginning of a cramp.
Was it a twinge or a stabby?
It was both.
Okay.
It was like they would both work. It was like twingy and stabby.
A stabby.
It was. It's like it's so hard to explain, but it's like it's that thing where I'm sure my face was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
like deer in headlights.
Yeah,
Like my body is breaking down, and it's breaking down fast.
it's happening.
But I just thought like I gotta keep going, and then I would think like, okay, my legs are sore. I've made it from 15 to 20, and they haven't changed that much.
Yeah.
It came on really fast, and then just kind of stayed bad.
Yeah.
And then the last 10K, because it went downhill again, I was thinking like, okay, this is hurting.
Yeah.
But also I knew like I kept clicking off kilometers at my pace, and I'm like, if I can do that kilometer, then I can do this kilometer.
Yeah.
And then it would be like, hey, I've done 35 kilometers, I can do another kilometer.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I did it. It was like just keep that confidence, like, you know, yeah, you can walk or you can slow down. Although walking was never an option. It's
I
like,
saw a lot of. I was surprised by the number of people who I saw walking. Granted, we were at the 25-mile mark, just
Yeah.
past it. So I think, you know, you're kind of close to the end. But you know, I saw a lot of people in Chicago walking. But you
Mhm.
also have to remember a lot of people there are on lottery or
yeah.
charity. You know, Boston is 80% qualified runners, and the Boston standard is quick. And so I was just surprised to see so many people walking
Mhm.
at what, even with wave one, would be a pretty like, yeah, people who probably weren't planning on walking.
Oh yeah, I don't think anyone plans to.
No.
I think a lot of it probably comes down to cramping, or just like you have that like mounting desire to stop.
I think
And
that
maybe it just gets to you.
yeah, and probably too, if it's a first time Boston experience, I think a lot of people get away with running marathons without doing a lot of, you know, water, fluids, gels, carbs, electrolytes. I think it is possible to get through a marathon like not doing those things, but I feel like with Boston, where it is so much downhill, it is such a challenging course that if you don't do those things early just because you feel good, you might set yourself up even more for that kind of thing later in the
Mhm.
race. So yeah, I mean, I would say your fueling is on a shorter interval than a lot of people would expect.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell I was seeing what people had on the course, like in the starting corral. Not that many people seem to have gels on them, or I would see them running with the belt where you have the gels kind of like stuffed in like a little
Holder thing,
hole,
right?
and it would be like 2, and I'm like, dude, I have 6 gels or 5 gels,
Yeah.
and I was also taking in Gatorade at almost every station. So
what was what was your nutrition?
well, first I
like?
want to go back to the walking part.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I think the one thing that deterred me from walking, besides just the fact that I just don't want to be that person, was that in Chicago, when I crossed the finish line, my legs went from like 10 out of 10 sore to like 20 out of 10 sore. Like they got as soon as I stopped, I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't move. So I was thinking in Chicago, in Boston, if I walk, how am I going to start again?
Yeah.
I think starting after walking is really hard.
Yes.
But yeah, back to the fueling.
So what was your plan there? What was your strategy? It's the same as Chicago, but maybe people have
Yeah.
forgotten what that was.
So intra, I basically did every 4K. I took in between 10 and 20 grams of carbs.
So 4K for you is about 20 minutes.
18 to 20 minutes.
Yep.
Obviously, it varied slightly because they had Gatorade and water stations every mile. And I work off kilometers. So when I was at the 4 kilometer mark, it wasn't exactly on the mile. So I had to just think, okay, there was a little bit of thinking that had to go on in the race to figure out when to take the gel. So it would alternate every 4 kilometers. I was taking in some form of carbs. I would start with the first 4 I did one gel, which has 20 grams of carbs. It has electrolytes and then caffeine and water. And it was like 4 ounces of water. So like I would take in one of the little cups that they gave you. Problem is like you're supposed to take the gels with the water. So I'd have to see in front of me around the 4K mark or 12K mark or 20K mark when it was coming up, and then take in a gel quickly, and then a minute later have the water. On the alternate 4K intervals, I would have Gatorade. So I would try to get in 2 of those cups at the Gatorade points.
Yep.
And they had Gatorade and water at every single mile.
Yeah.
I don't think I was actually taking in quite as much Gatorade as I would have liked, but because it's just a lot of fluid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the 4K I would take in a gel and water, 8K Gatorade, 12K, and then alternating till the finish.
Yeah.
It was I was so worried. The last gel I took in this, they have Goo Gel Roctane, which is a little bit higher in electrolytes and caffeine.
Yeah.
And I took it in with knowing that there was going to be a Gatorade and a water station coming up. And because there are so many people on the course at once, they have on the right side, it would be like Gatorade water. And then as soon as the water ended, on the left side, it would be like Gatorade water, just so that
not everyone's trying to like bottleneck into one.
Exactly. So if you didn't want water, you would run on the left and then kind of switch over to the right. So I was waiting for the left side. And at this one station, they only had it on the right side.
Oh.
And so I ran by and I was like, I didn't get water. And then I'm worried, like, shoot.
Excuse me, somebody. Water.
Shoot. Like, the thing about those gels, if you don't take them with water, they're very highly, highly concentrated.
Yeah.
And so you need fluid to kind of like get them to pass through your
They can
system.
give you diarrhea.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, oh my God, I'm starting to feel my stomach ache. But then I thought, okay, well, I've been taking in fluids for like the last 2.5 hours. I'm pretty sure I'm good.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things.
Yep.
Where I, if there's something to panic over,
we'll find it.
Panic.
Maybe the panic distracted from your leg pain, though.
I also took in a lot of carbs before the race because the race didn't start till 10:30.
What was your carb intake prior to 10:30 ballpark?
Probably close to 150.
Yeah.
Carbs.
Yep.
So I had a breakfast when I woke up around 6 and coffee, and then I had a bit more carbs, and then on the way on the bus at 8:30, 8:45, I had like a huge bowl of oatmeal with raisins in it.
Yeah.
And it was oatmeal that had some of the like flavored oatmeal, so it had sugar in it.
Yeah.
And then I was sipping on Gatorade. And then before the race, like 20 minutes before, I had some of those like endurance gummies, like candy. So it was definitely a lot. But because I had been up for almost 4 hours before my start, I was able to get in quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then the 2 days before, from like a carb loading perspective, I had 450 grams carbs, keeping protein and fat low.
Mm-hmm.
And then the day before, I had 550 grams carbs, keeping fat and protein low.
Yeah.
Which, like, it's not that much food from like a calorie standpoint. I think it's just hard to carb load for me because my appetite, I'm not a big eater to begin with. And then leading up to a race, you're not training as hard because you're tapered. And also you have some nerves. And so your appetite isn't 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So you really have to be intentional. But you helped me a lot.
It does help to have a helper.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who reminds you and maybe keeps your food schedule. You don't need someone to keep your food schedule, but if you're like me, it might help to have someone like you who's just a bit more like schedule oriented. But like literally just having someone remind you to eat when you don't feel like eating, because appetite goes both ways. Like some people eat when they aren't hungry, and I don't know. It's really helpful to have someone there to remind you to do those things. So Boston's like it's a bucket list race for a lot of people. A lot of runners will spend their entire career trying to qualify for Boston, and part of it is it's the oldest marathon in the world, longest running marathon in the world. What was it for you? Like, was the experience bucket list worthy? Like, this is we've talked about this, so I kind of know your thoughts, but I think that people might find your perspective on Boston interesting from a purely objective kind of standpoint.
Yeah. Well, not having been in the running community for very long, I didn't really have any crazy expectations. But when I got there, and a couple of people who had run it told me, "Oh well, be prepared. It's quite an experience," which I guess it was. Like when you land in Boston, it's Boston Marathon. Like all the hotels are Boston Marathon. What was interesting is there are these like jackets, Boston Marathon jackets, and each year they're a different color to signify like what year you've run. And there are so many of these jackets around. I thought for sure that they were free. Like you were given one when you got your race package, but you don't. You have to buy them.
And anyone can buy them.
And anyone can buy them, but like it was interesting because there were people wearing Boston jackets that weren't from even last. Like there were some from this year. Well, a lot from this year. There were a lot from last year. There were just like all these different ones.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just, I guess it's part of the tradition. Like
you wear your jacket.
You wear your jacket. And there were a lot of people, if they weren't wearing their jacket, they were wearing like a Boston hat, like a Boston Marathon hat. Like it was very, much more so than in Chicago.
Yeah.
It definitely had what's the word? Like
cult?
Yeah, a little bit. It's like there's a prestige.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of like, when you go to like Harvard campus, not that I've been there.
Well, Harvard is, yeah.
It's like everyone wears Harvard. I know it, Harvard like sweaters.
Yeah.
Like Ivy League. Boston Marathon kind of reminded me of like the Ivy League of marathons.
It's like I'll point out.
And I'm not being negative here.
No. I think that there's an interesting point to be made. So it's really any university or like big university in the US. You go to the campus, everyone's wearing NC State or UNC or whatever. Like people wear it on campus and then they wear it after they graduate, and it's like a big part of their identity. And I think that same kind of thing happens in Boston. And I think that there's like, and maybe your reluctance to buy one of those jackets and partake is a cultural difference with you being Canadian. Like I don't see people do that as much here. There's not as much social identification with things that you do, universities that you attend, that kind of thing. Whereas in the US, that's a really big deal. It's why a lot of that, like some people go to universities just because of that. It's like so important to their social identity to be a part of something like that. And I think that's probably why, on top of the fact that it is just a bucket list, it's something that people spend years trying to do, and they're probably just really proud of that. Like I know myself, I would buy a jacket, but yeah, I'm also like when I was at State, even now I have tons of NC State stuff.
Yeah, and now you live in Canada and you're wearing a Canada sweater as we speak.
It's just
like what you do.
It is exactly what I do.
You like arrived and you're like, I need a flannel. Stat.
Immediately. Buffalo, red and black, please. Several of them. But it's yeah, I think that's it. I think that's
you want a Canadian like themed guest bedroom.
We have a Canadian themed guest bedroom. So
like, okay. But yeah, it was very interesting in that way. In terms of the actual like race experience. Well, actually I will say I didn't find it to be that different than like the games, like in Madison.
Yeah.
Like in Madison, you get off and there's like posters of Tia Claire Toomey, and you're in Madison and it's all about CrossFit. But again, I had a small town, a big event, that sort of thing. So I guess I had some experience with that in a way.
Yeah.
The one difference that I will mention, because I'm sure a lot of people listening have done CrossFit or do CrossFit. What I love about running marathons, and again, I'm inexperienced, but from my experiences, in comparison to CrossFit, when you go to a marathon, like Boston, for example, what is awesome about that, what is similar to CrossFit is everyone at the CrossFit Games does CrossFit, the majority of people in some capacity, which is really cool. It's not like when you go to a baseball game, most people in the stands have never played baseball or hockey or football. You're just getting, people who eat hot dogs and drink beer.
I mean,
no offense.
It's okay.
When you have at a marathon, like I'm at the expo and everyone there is running a marathon.
Yeah.
Or runs. Like it's not about the top 40.
No, and
it's not about, Tia Claire Toomey or Matt Fraser or Rich Froning. It's not, no one even, the top people don't even know who's there from the elites.
Well, that's the crazy. I mean, we stood there at 25 and we were there early enough where we saw the elites come by. And yeah, it's awesome to see that level of talent in person, but it's not like, it's not like the leaders ran by and then people started leaving because they're like, well, I saw who I came here to see.
Yeah.
If anything, the crowds got bigger once they came by, because people are there not to support the elites specifically. They are there to support every single person who's on the course running the marathon.
Yeah. And that's what I love about marathons.
Yeah.
Is that everyone there is actually doing it.
Yeah.
Not does it. Is competing, is there to PR for themselves, and it has the support from other athletes and from other spectators, and everyone's there. Like there's a lot of people there with their families and stuff like that. It's just like, I don't know. There's an experience to it, even though you're just out there running. Having you there, having my parents there, it's an experience. That's
I think
different.
it's like marathons are pretty emotional to begin with, probably more so when you have someone specifically running the race. But even if you didn't, it's not lost on me that everyone out there running has a story of how they got there. And especially a race like Boston where most people have had to qualify, that's a lot of training. Yep. Almost everybody out there they have miles and miles and miles that they put in. They've run through the winter. They've probably suffered injuries. They've had setbacks. They've had to deal with, balancing a work and a family life with, the demands of marathon training. Everyone out there, has a story probably with, good moments and really hard moments. And so I just find it's amazing to watch people do it. And I think that's,
well, and you have people on the course. I ran by a guy pushing a wheelchair.
I saw too. Yeah.
And you have adaptive athletes, and I mean, you get that in CrossFit, but you don't. And yeah, you get it at the games now, but they're on the same course.
I know, and they're running.
They're not in some barn in the back of Madison. You don't have the Masters athletes are on the same course as.
And they're receiving the same support. It's not...
They're doing the same thing.
Yeah. People aren't there watching because they have nothing else to do and they're trying to pass the time. It's not like watching Heat 4 at the games go. They are there to fully support Heat 4 or Heat 1, whatever the bad quote unquote bad heat is. Or the Masters or the teens or the adaptive. Those people receive the exact same amount of support as the people who are out there winning. In fact, probably more, because a lot of people don't get to the course to even see the winners because they leave so early.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that. One more thing I like about running marathons specifically, or half marathon, is you get a time and everyone knows what that means. Whereas at the CrossFit Games, it's different every time.
Yeah. You can't, if you say to just a stranger on the street, well, I ran a marathon. Number one, they're going to know what that means. And if they have any, background in running at all, if you say I ran a 3:08, they're going to go, holy crap, that's really fast. What's that pace? And you say, oh, it's about a 7:10 per mile. And they're like, oh my God. Because a lot of people have run around between 7 and 8 minute miles, that pace for some period of time.
It's relatable-ish.
Yeah. Whereas if you, in CrossFit, if you say, well, I'm a CrossFit Games athlete, to someone on the street, they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
What is that? Oh, okay. What does that mean? And even if you were to say, I completed Murph in 44 minutes, they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
So it's not as relatable. And I think the thing that I really like about running is that it's so accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It's like from an exercise standpoint, it's the only thing really I think we're born with an understanding of how to do. You don't have to learn how to walk. You don't have to learn how to run. You can just go out the door and run, and you get better at doing it the more you do it. There's not really a lot of technique to it. Like the technique things tend to fix themselves. Everyone has a unique way of doing it that fits their biomechanics. Whereas like CrossFit, you have to learn how to do that stuff.
Yeah.
It's not natural. And then it's not really that accessible for people. It's not something that literally anyone in the world can go do. You have to have access to equipment. You have to have access to a gym. You have to have access, if you want to do it for free at home, you have to have access to the internet. Yeah, I there's something really pure about running that I guess I'm becoming a bit more drawn to.
The one thing I really enjoy about running a marathon is it's one event. And then the next day you can do nothing.
Yeah.
You can like, we were walking around Boston the next day and I was thinking to myself, I have been this sore and had to do another day of competing several times in my CrossFit career. And I'm like, this is nice.
Yeah.
I don't have to go for a run. I don't have to jump on a box. I don't have to do a 150-pound overhead squat. Like, I don't have to do the event. I don't, like,
I don't have to do thrusters. I don't have to do rope climbs. I don't have to do muscle ups.
Like, I will say I was probably more sore after doing Murph at the 2015 games than I was after the marathon. And I had to do 3 more days of competing at the games.
Yeah.
Like CrossFit's next level. Like running a marathon's hard.
Yeah.
It is hard, and it's hard because of the duration and the there is a lot of like training that is required to be okay after a marathon or be okay during. But holy moly.
I think that a marathon's harder. Like a CrossFit athlete could not just go run a marathon.
No, it's different. You have to train. But I don't know, there's this like competing at the higher level in CrossFit. It's its own beast.
Yes.
Like thinking back, like, oh man, some of those days, those sore days, waking up and having to do a whole full day of competing.
Yeah.
And just like the amount of adrenaline you feel before each event. I don't know, like a marathon, you're bust out. It's like, you're just like hanging out by the porta potties. Everyone's chill.
Yeah. You have the adrenaline rush like right before and then it's done, instead of like, you're up and down and up and down and up and down. It's like CrossFit's like a psychotic track meet.
It really is.
It's like where you do like, it's like a decathlon, but worse because it's like that level of adrenaline probably before each event, except there are more events and you also have absolutely no idea what the events are going to be. It's like, I don't understand how people's nervous systems aren't just completely fucked.
They
probably are. Like I was there where I'm just like I can't do this anymore. I need to stop. Where you just
like, I don't think I've ever gone into the last day of competition like excited to do an event. I'm always like, I got to get this over with.
Yeah. I think that you can offset that a little bit. Like you can obviously eat for it and endure it. But I think the best that you can do is endure it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely nice to do like one and done. Really, it is.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah, I mean, going back to the discussion on what Boston was like, the actual race was great. There are a lot of really cool parts of the course, and there were a ton of fans. But, and this may be a very unpopular opinion, I think Chicago was actually more exciting.
Yeah.
Like the you're not running point to point, so you're not like way out there. You don't have to take a bus. And you're kind of just running through different parts of the city, and you get the different boroughs. And I actually think there are more fans in Chicago.
Yeah.
There was more music, there were more people. And maybe it was because you don't have as many people who are as intense or who had to qualify. But I would say like Chicago had a bigger vibe in a way.
Yeah.
So, if you're, I think Chicago is definitely something that if you're running marathons and you're not somebody who's going to qualify for Boston, Chicago is an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I think New York is on my bucket list.
Well,
next.
Chicago is, I didn't realize this, I guess. The population of Chicago is 2.7 million people. Population of Boston, 685,000.
Yeah, that explains a lot.
Yeah. So I think you're going to feel that a little bit.
Like, you were there. Were there more people on the course in Chicago?
Chicago was really difficult to navigate. I mean, it was more, I will say from a spectator standpoint, more accessible because of the way that the course is designed. Like you can walk and get to more places. Whereas I think because Boston is point to point and kind of straight out, it's not particularly friendly. So like I didn't get to experience Boston. Like I don't know what it was like at the 15-kilometer mark, but it makes sense that you say that because of in my perception of Chicago moving around was that there are a lot of people out for this race.
There were more people on the course for sure. There was more music. There was just like more entertainment.
Yeah,
on the course.
And I think the neighborhood vibe, like the neighborhood thing in Chicago, is a really big deal. Like the neighborhoods want to have their own individual kind of experience. And that's what, like, you know, I have a client in Chicago, and that's her big thing is each neighborhood is quite different. Where I think Boston has, like, you know, obviously the tunnel, whatever, Willacy tunnel. That's kind of a special thing.
Yeah, the Scream tunnel. Yeah, there's definitely points in the race where you feel this special experience.
But I don't think it's quite as sustained as Chicago, or at least based on what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, there were moments in Chicago I was like, oh, okay, this is a lot.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I felt that in Boston. It just wasn't as much.
Yep.
But overall, like, it was, I'm really stoked with the experience. It's like, I don't think I changed as a person or learned anything new about myself, but it's just like, it's this thing that this thing that I have now, this experience. It's just like a special one.
Yeah. That's, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a feather in your cap, a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's, a lot of people do set out, maybe we can end on this topic. I think a lot of people do set out to do marathons and Ironman and things like that to prove something to themselves and to learn about themselves. And I'll only bring this up because someone asked you this the other day. What did you learn about yourself? And I think for you, and probably for me, if I did this as well, like it's not so much learning anything new. It's more like confirming what you already know, not to sound like a snob. But it's like you said, you've been an athlete for so long that there's not really a lot more to learn. Like maybe if you did an ultra, maybe if you got really into like yoga or something super off center for you, then you would learn. Yoga is not really a sport, or is it? I think there's
I don't think you can compete in yoga. I think that's like part of it.
I know, but I mean you can. You just can't talk about it. No, but I think there's nothing wrong with doing events like that to try and learn something about yourself.
Yeah.
I think that accomplishing hard things is a really important part of life. And if, you know, a marathon or a half marathon or even like a 10K, whatever it is, kickstarts that for you, then good. That's a good thing. I think for, you know, a hard thing for you where you might learn more about yourself would be like taking 2 weeks off exercise, and instead of, you know, doing very active, like, you know, fitness type things, spend 2 weeks disconnecting, being calm, mindful. And I'm not suggesting this.
Sounds awful.
But that's where,
that's
where you would learn more about yourself. Something like that. So yeah, the Boston Marathon just confirmed that you're really good at running.
Oh, thanks.
Which we already know. So.
I'm currently in the midst of convincing Meredith to run a marathon with me.
Not just any marathon.
With me, but
yeah,
I mean, obviously not.
Well, that's why she suggested the New York Marathon.
Yeah.
In 2022.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I can't do 2022. How am I supposed to beat you? I had to you have like a 4-month head start. But yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done it without you.
I'm not so sure about that, but I hope that I
Okay,
made it
I'll say
easier.
this. Having even though I'm out there on my own running a marathon, having the support, like knowing Meredith is watching, and like all of these people, like, you know, people I'm sure who are listening now today were following along on the live feed, following along on Instagram. And I was thinking about that during the race. I was thinking Meredith is going to be proud of that. Like, I got to keep the pace up. She's watching. Everyone's watching. Like, you know, having that support, seeing, like, you know, I had a couple clients in Boston and I saw one of them on the course just like screaming her head off. And that was so amazing. And you know, I met a new friend on the bus, and, you know, seeing you and your stepsister and my parents and having them there, like, that all adds to the experience. Like, I think if I had gone to Boston by myself, it just wouldn't have been the same. Even though, like, would the marathon have changed? Not really, but it's all the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's that support, and it adds so much to the experience.
Yeah.
So I'll say that. So thanks for coming.
My pleasure. All right. So I guess that's it. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed following along to the Boston updates while I was there. That was really difficult to do because we weren't moving around that much, but I personally enjoyed, like, learning more about the race while I was out there and having some fun with that. So thanks for, we got like 1,000 DMs on that. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the support because it's really hard to do and it makes me want to do it again. And yeah, I would say if I'm doing a race and Alex is on the Instagram, maybe lower your expectations.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. You're like, look at this patch of grass. Yeah, room to grow on that, I guess. But,
okay, I have to defend myself. You've done races and I've done just fine
I know.
in keeping people entertained. Thank you very much.
We just have a different flavor of entertainment, I think.
I like highbrow jokes that most people don't even know that I'm joking.
Yeah,
And you like the educational aspect of things.
I do. You know who was really impressed by that was your mom.
Yeah.
So it was cool. Righto. So we're back in town. I guess we'll be back on a more regular podcast schedule. I think we have Lindsay scheduled on for the next one, so look out for that.
Have you ever noticed, and I'm talking to the listener, how Meredith really drags out the ends of podcasts? No? Okay, never mind. Okay, can we end it?
Yeah, like, subscribe, share. We'll talk to you again super soon. Goodbye.